Have you ever sent a message you knew would destroy everything you'd carefully built? A text so desperate, so dangerous that your finger hovered over the send button for what felt like hours? Zuri Miller sat in her Seoul apartment at 2:47 in the morning, staring at 3 words she'd typed and deleted 7 times. 3 words that would bring back the man she'd spent 2 years running from. 3 words that would crack open a door she'd sealed shut with every ounce of strength she had. Your son. No milk. In her arms, 10-month-old Minji cried that specific cry that only mothers understand. The hungry one. The desperate one. The one that tears your heart in half because you know what your baby needs and you can't provide it. Her wallet held 2001. About $1.50. The corner store had closed an hour ago. And the only person she could call, the only person with the power to help her right now, was the one person she'd sworn never to contact again. Han Jihun. The man who'd hidden who he really was. The man whose world operated in shadows and back rooms. The man who didn't know he had a son. But tonight, pride doesn't feed babies. Tonight, survival beats dignity. Tonight, a mother does what she has to do. She closed her eyes and hit send. And just like that, 2 years of carefully constructed walls came crashing down. Before we dive into what happens next, I need to know something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments because I want to see how far this story reaches. Seoul? New York? London? Lagos? Love and desperation don't have borders, and neither does the pain of choosing between pride and survival. If you've ever had to swallow your pride and ask for help from someone you swore you'd never contact again, this story is for you. If you've ever loved someone dangerous, someone complicated, someone you knew you should walk away from but couldn't, this is your story too. Hit that subscribe button right now because the next 43 minutes will take you through a journey of secrets, second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't fit into neat boxes. I promise you, by the end of this, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about forgiveness and family. Now, let's talk about what happened when that text landed on the phone of one of Seoul's most dangerous men. 20 minutes after Zuri hit send, her phone vibrated. One word, coming. She sat in her 4th floor walk-up where the heating barely worked, holding Minji and trying to stop shaking. Part of her wanted to unsend the message, to delete his number, to pretend she could handle this alone like she'd handled everything else for the past 2 years. But Minji's whimpers kept her rooted in reality. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about a hungry baby who deserved to eat, regardless of how much pride it cost his mother. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Kim next door watching her late-night drama. She could hear the couple upstairs arguing about money again. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The sounds of her world, the world she'd built after leaving his. Then she heard something different. The rumble of an expensive engine. The kind that doesn't belong in this neighborhood. Zuri moved to the window and looked down. A black Genesis GV80 sat at the curb, sleek and predatory among the beat-up sedans and scooters that usually lined this street. The back door opened and a man stepped out first. Not Jihan. Someone else. Tall, watchful, scanning the street with the kind of awareness that comes from expecting danger at every corner. A bodyguard. Of course he'd bring a bodyguard. Then Jihan emerged. 2 years had passed, but Zuri's body remembered him instantly. The way he moved like he owned the ground beneath his feet. The sharp lines of his face caught in the streetlight. The suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. He carried a paper bag from a convenience store, and even from 4 floors up, even in the middle of the night, he looked like power made flesh. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. Something between recognition and warning. There was a reason she'd left this man. A reason she'd chosen a 4th floor walk-up with broken heating over the penthouse life he'd offered. A reason she'd kept his son a secret for 10 months of pregnancy and 10 months of babyhood. Jihan didn't live in the normal world. He lived in a world of whispers and deals made in basement rooms. He ran Biko Group, and everyone in Seoul knew that Biko Group's official business dealings were just the tip of an iceberg that went very, very deep. She'd learned that too late, after she'd already fallen in love with a man who'd shown her only his surface while keeping everything dangerous hidden below. The knock came. 3 sharp raps that somehow sounded expensive. Zuri opened the door before Jihan could knock again. She didn't want him waking the neighbors. Didn't want questions she couldn't answer. They stood there for a moment just looking at each other across 2 years of silence. He looked older. Not visibly, but something in his eyes had aged. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. The exhaustion, probably. The shadows under her eyes from too many double shifts at the diner. The cheap sweater with a hole in the sleeve. Everything that proved she'd been doing this alone. Zuri forced her voice steady. Just leave the milk and go. But Jihan didn't move to hand her the bag. Instead, his eyes went past her into the apartment, searching. I came for my son, he said. And his voice was lower than she remembered, rougher, like something had scraped it raw. Behind her, Minji whimpered. Just a small sound, but it cut through the moment like a knife. Zuri saw something flash across Jihan's face. Something unguarded and raw before the mask slammed back into place. He's not a possession you can claim, Zuri whispered. She shifted Minji to her other hip. A protective gesture that was pure instinct. No, Jihan agreed. And there was something in his tone she couldn't quite read. He's my child. And I won't leave him hungry. The moment stretched. Outside, rain started to fall, soft against the windows. Zuri could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She could take the milk and close the door. Could maintain the walls. Could keep her life separate from his dangerous world. But Minji was staring at the stranger with wide, curious eyes. Dark eyes. His father's eyes. One bottle, Zuri heard herself say. Then you leave. Even as the words left her mouth, even as she stepped back to let him in, a voice in her head whispered that she was making a mistake. That some doors once opened don't close again. That she was letting in not just a man but an entire world she'd fought so hard to escape. But Minji needed to eat. And sometimes survival means accepting help from dangerous places. Jihan stepped into her apartment, and immediately the space felt different. Smaller. Like his presence took up more room than his physical body. Men like him didn't fit in places this honest, this small. They were built for penthouses and boardrooms in spaces designed to impress and intimidate. Here, surrounded by second-hand furniture and Minji's scattered toys, and the smell of the cheap curry she'd made for dinner, Jihan looked wrong. Out of place. Like a wolf in a rabbit's den. He moved to the kitchen counter and set down the bag. His movements were precise, controlled, and Zuri remembered that control. How it had felt like safety until she'd learned it was really a cage. How he measured everything, calculated everything, played chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He began pulling items from the bag. Formula. Bottled water. Diapers. Baby wipes. Teething toys. More than she'd asked for. More than 3 words could possibly demand. Zuri watched him, this man who commanded rooms full of powerful people, who made decisions that moved millions of one, who lived in a world where one wrong word could end a business or worse. And now here he was, standing in her cramped kitchen at 3 in the morning, unpacking baby supplies like he did it every day. How long, Jihan said. His back still turned to her. How long has it been like this? Zuri's jaw tightened. She bounced Minji gently, trying to keep the baby calm, trying to keep herself calm. Does it matter? You weren't there. Because you left, Jihan said. And there was no accusation in his tone. Just fact. Just the truth laid bare. Without telling you I was pregnant, Zuri shot back. Without telling you that I was carrying the child of a man who runs an empire built on fear. Her voice rose despite her best efforts. Without telling you that I couldn't justify staying, couldn't justify bringing a baby into a world where people disappear and deals are made in dark rooms and... Minji startled at her raised voice, his little face crumpling. Immediately Zuri softened, bouncing him, shushing him, hating herself for letting her emotions spill over onto her son. I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. Mama's here. You're okay. Jihan turned then. His face was that perfect mask again, but something in his eyes wasn't quite controlled. You should have told me. Would you have let me go? Zuri met his gaze. If I told you I was pregnant, would you have respected my choice to leave? Or would you have used every tool in your arsenal to keep me? Money, influence, pressure, control? Would you have let me walk away? The silence that followed was answer enough. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a siren wailed past, so common in this part of Seoul that neither of them reacted. But through the window Zuri could see Jihan's bodyguard, Yunsu, standing by the car. Always watching. Always guarding. A reminder that Jihan never went anywhere without protection. Without the machinery of his dangerous life surrounding him. The formula needs warm water, Zuri said quietly. changing the subject because going down this road led nowhere good. Not hot. Test it on your wrist. Jihan moved to the sink. She watched him fill a cup with water, watched him struggle for a moment with the formula container before figuring out the measurements. His hands that signed contracts worth billions, hands that she'd once felt gentle on her skin, hands that had probably done things she didn't let herself imagine, fumbled with the simple act of making a bottle. He was efficient in boardrooms and negotiations. He could read a balance sheet in seconds and spot the weakness in any business deal. But this language of caregiving was foreign territory. Zuri didn't help, couldn't. If she stepped closer, if she let herself slip back into the ease of proximity, if she remembered what his presence used to mean, she'd crumble. And she couldn't afford to crumble. Not with Minji depending on her. The baby reached toward Jihan, little fingers grasping at air. He doesn't know you, Zuri said. It was meant as a warning, maybe. Or a reassurance to herself. I know, Jihan replied. He tested the formula temperature on his wrist the way she'd instructed. His movements careful and deliberate. But I'm here now. And that, Zuri thought, watching him, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. Not that you came. That you'll stay. That your world, the one I ran from, will swallow us whole. Let me pause here for just a moment, because I need to know if this story is resonating with you. Have you ever been in Zuri's position, where accepting help from someone means opening a door you worked so hard to close? Have you ever had to choose between your pride and your child's needs? If you're still watching, that means something about this story is hitting home. And before we continue into the part where everything gets complicated, where lawyers get involved and families collide and Zuri has to make impossible choices, I need you to do something. Smash that like button right now if you're invested in where this goes. Subscribe and turn on notifications because you absolutely do not want to miss what happens when Jihan's mother finds out about her grandson, or when Zuri discovers what Jihan's been planning behind her back. Drop a comment telling me, Team Zuri or Team Jihan? Who do you think is making the right choices here? Because honestly, this story isn't about right and wrong. It's about two people trying to navigate an impossible situation with a child caught in the middle. Alright, let's get back to it because what happens next changes everything. Jihan held Minji awkwardly at first, the bottle positioned wrong, his grip too tentative. But then something shifted. Some instinct clicked into place and he adjusted, cradling the baby more securely. Minji latched onto the bottle and drank with the desperate hunger of a child who'd been crying for food for too long. Zuri watched them, father and son, and felt something crack in her chest. The sight stole her breath. She turned away, looked out the window at rain streaking the glass, because if she kept looking, she'd see all the what-ifs, all the versions of life that could have been. Somewhere in this city, in the penthouse she'd visited exactly 3 times before she'd figured out what Jihan really was, there existed a life she'd walked away from. Silk sheets and safety. But she'd learned that safety bought with blood isn't real safety at all. Why now? Zuri asked the window because she couldn't look at him while asking. Why come now after 2 years? Because he's mine, Jihan said simply. That's not love, Zuri said. That's ownership. Then teach me the difference. Zuri turned, surprised by the vulnerability in those words. Jihan was looking at her over their son's head, and for just a second the mask slipped. Underneath he looked terrified. The bottle emptied. Minji's eyes fluttered closed, milk-drunk in content. Jihan didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly, as if afraid to disturb the baby. He just sat there, this powerful man, frozen by the weight of a 10-month-old child. I can't let you stay here, Jihan said finally. Not in this building. Not in this neighborhood. It's not safe. It's home, Zuri countered. It's not safe. His voice was firmer now. Men know I have enemies. If they discover you exist, discover he exists. And your world is safer? Zuri's laugh came out bitter. The world where men in suits make people disappear? Where every business dinner has armed guards at the door? Where alliances shift like sand? At least there no one would dare touch you. Because you belong to me. Like property. Jihan carefully, so carefully, stood and moved to the crib. A second-hand thing Zuri had bought for 50,000 won. With chipped paint and a loose bolt she tightened herself. He laid Minji down with surprising gentleness. The baby sighed but didn't wake. When Jihan turned back to face her, the careful control had returned. I have a house, he said. In Songbukdong. Gated secure. A room for him. A room for you. I'm not moving into your house. Then I'm moving here. The absurdity of it should have made her laugh. Han Jihun, heir to Biko Group. Living in a fourth-floor walk-up with broken heating and walls thin enough to hear the neighbors argue about money every night. But he was serious. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, in the way he looked around her small apartment like he was already calculating logistics. You can't, Zuri said, stepping closer. Close enough to see the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the exhaustion he hid behind perfect posture. You don't get to do this. Show up after 2 years and rearrange our lives because you feel guilty or obligated or whatever this is. This is me trying to be a father. Fathers don't terrorize neighborhoods by existing in them. Your presence alone, she gestured to the window where Yunsu stood watch, that brings attention. Danger. The kind of attention I've worked hard to avoid. Then come with me. Where I can protect you. I don't need your protection. I need, her voice broke. She hated that it did. I need you to understand that leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. That every day I look at Minji and see you. That I can't. She stopped. Too much. Too honest. Jihan moved closer. Not touching, but close enough that she could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker like smoke. Can't what? Can't let myself want this. The truth, raw and bleeding between them. Can't let myself imagine a world where you're not what you are. Where we could be a family. The word hung heavy in the air. Family. Such a simple word. Such an impossible concept for people like them. Outside, a car backfired. Zuri flinched. Jihan's hand moved to his side, an instinct she recognized, reaching for a weapon that might or might not be there. She didn't know anymore. Didn't want to know. Even now, she said quietly, you're thinking about threats. About control. That's not the life I want for our son. Then what life do you want? Jihan's voice rose slightly. This? Struggling to buy milk? Working double shifts at a diner while strangers watch him? Mrs. Kim isn't a stranger. She's my neighbor. My friend. And when Mrs. Kim can't watch him? When you're too exhausted to stand? When he stopped, ran a hand through his hair. The first truly uncontrolled gesture she'd seen. I have resources, Zuri. Let me use them. Resources aren't love. No, he agreed. But love without resources is martyrdom. And he deserves better than watching his mother sacrifice herself. The words landed like a blow because he wasn't wrong. Zuri had been running on pride and stubbornness, but pride didn't feed a baby. Stubbornness didn't pay rent. And there had been nights, so many nights, when she'd lain awake wondering how much longer she could keep this up. One week she heard herself say, "What? You want to prove you're serious about being a father? Come back tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that. Show up when it's not dramatic. When it's just life." Jihan's eyes narrowed. A test. A chance, Zuri corrected. Prove you're not just reacting to guilt or obligation. Prove you actually want this. She could see him calculating, weighing options, running scenarios. That was his world. Strategy and leverage and thinking 3 moves ahead. But then he nodded. 1 week. Every day. 7 a.m. Zuri specified. When Minji wakes up. Be here. Done. And Jihan? She stopped him at the door. Come alone. No bodyguards in the hallway. No cars that scream money. If you want to be part of our world, you have to actually be in it. Not hovering above it. Something flickered in his expression. Respect maybe. Or challenge accepted. 7 a.m. he repeated. I'll be here. He left. The apartment felt larger and emptier at once. Zuri locked the door, all 3 locks, because old habits died hard. Through the window she watched the Genesis pull away into the soul night. She didn't let herself cry. Not yet. Not until she was sure he couldn't somehow see. Day 1 arrived with Jihan at her door at 6:47 in the morning. Zuri answered in her diner uniform, the dress and apron that smelled like coffee and yesterday's breakfast rush. He was dressed differently than the night before. Still expensive, she could tell quality when she saw it, but simpler. Dark jeans. A sweater. Almost normal. Almost like he could belong in this world instead of standing out like a beacon. Minji was already awake, babbling in his crib with that particular brand of morning energy that only babies possess. You're early, Zuri said. Didn't want to be late. Over the next hour, they fell into an uneasy rhythm. Zuri showed Jihan how to change a diaper, properly this time, Not the disaster he'd attempted on his first try. She showed him how to prepare the morning bottle, how to test the temperature, how to hold Minji at the right angle to prevent gas. She showed him the small dance of caregiving that she'd learned through trial and error and exhaustion. Jihan watched, absorbed, asked questions. When she handed him the baby, he was less awkward than before, his movements gaining confidence. I have to leave for work in 20 minutes, Zuri said. Mrs. Kim will be here at 8 to watch him. I'll stay until then. You don't have to. I want to. They settled into the routine. Zuri ate toast standing up, a habit from too many rushed mornings. Jihan sat with Minji, attempting to interest him in soft blocks. The baby seemed more fascinated by his father's watch, reaching for the shine of expensive metal. He has good taste, Zuri observed. Almost a joke. She almost smiled. Day 2 was the same. Jihan at 6:52, bringing fresh bread from the bakery down the street. Not the expensive imported kind from the French patisserie in Gangnam, but the simple rolls that Mrs. Kim bought. The kind that cost 2,001 for a bag of 6. He was learning. Day 3, Jihan arrived with dark circles under his eyes. Zuri later learned he'd been up all night handling a crisis at Biko Group. Some territorial dispute that could have cost millions. But he still showed up. Tired, distracted maybe, but present. Minji was starting to recognize him. When Jihan walked in, the baby's face lit up, arms reaching in that universal child demand. Up. Progress, fragile as morning frost. Day 4 brought the phone call that changed everything. Zuri was getting ready for work. Jihan was feeding Minji pureed sweet potato, and her phone rang. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. In her experience, unknown numbers at 7:30 in the morning never brought good news. Miss Miller? A man's voice. Professional. Cold. Unfamiliar. I'm calling from Biko Group's legal department. We'd like to schedule a meeting regarding custody arrangements for the minor child, Minji. Zuri's blood went ice cold. What? The minor child, Minji, the voice continued smoothly. We believe it's in everyone's best interest to formalize. She hung up. Turned to Jihan. He was still sitting with Minji, but something in his posture had changed. Attention. A guilty awareness. Did you, Zuri's voice shook, did you send lawyers after my son? Our son, Jihan said quietly. Answer the question. Minji started to cry. The sound cut through everything. Zuri scooped him up automatically, the way she'd done 1,000 times before, but her eyes never left Jihan's face. Jihan stood slowly. I spoke with legal yesterday. About options. Options. The word tasted like ash. You came here talking about proving yourself. About being a father. About showing up. And all along you were what? Building a case? Gathering ammunition? It's not like that. Then what is it like? She was shouting now, couldn't help it. You think because you have money and power you can just take him? That I'm some obstacle to remove? Zuri. Get out. Let me explain. Get out. Jihan didn't move. I'm not trying to take him from you. I'm trying to protect him. Both of you. By threatening me with lawyers? By using the system against someone who can't afford to fight back? That's not protection. She stopped, recalibrated. That's exactly what I was afraid of. That you'd revert to what you know. Control. Leverage. Power. Something crumbled in Jihan's expression then. The mask cracked and underneath was something raw and human and sorry. You're right, he said. The admission stunned her to silence. You're right, he repeated. I'm used to controlling situations. Using leverage. It's how I've survived. How I was raised. But that's not. He looked at Minji, still crying in Zuri's arms. That's not how to build trust. That's not how to be a father. No, Zuri said coldly. It's not. Jihan pulled out his phone. Dialed a number. Put it on speaker so she could hear. When someone answered, he said clearly, this is Han Jihun. Cancel all legal proceedings regarding Minji Miller immediately. And fire whoever called his mother without my direct authorization. Sir, a voice protested, the custody strategy requires. I'm not pursuing custody. I'm pursuing a relationship. If you can't understand the difference, you don't work for me. He hung up. Looked at Zuri. Satisfied? She should have been. But all she felt was exhausted. Why should this be different from all the other times you've said something to get what you want? Because this time, Jihan said, his voice dropping, I'm not pretending I know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be what he needs. What you need. I only know how to be what I was raised to be, powerful, untouchable, in control. He paused. Minji's crying had softened to whimpers. But that man? He's lonely. He's empty. And he just lost the only thing that made him feel human in 2 years. The confession hung in the air, raw and honest. I can't do this, Zuri whispered. I can't constantly wonder if you're maneuvering behind my back. If every gentle moment is just strategy, then I'll stop strategizing. Jihan stepped back, creating distance. Respect. Tell me your terms. What do you need from me to trust this? Transparency, Zuri said immediately. Complete transparency. If you're thinking about lawyers or moving us or anything involving our son, you talk to me first. Not your advisors. Not your legal team. Me. Done. And you stop trying to fix everything with money. Sometimes, he paused, sometimes money solves real problems. Sometimes, Zuri bounced Minji gently, sometimes what we need is just presence. Just showing up. Like you agreed to. 7 a.m. Jihan confirmed. Every day. Even when it's boring. Even when it's hard. Even when board meetings call. Even then. Minji had stopped crying, looking between his parents with those serious eyes. Dark and assessing even at 10 months old. Zuri finally said. Tomorrow. 7 a.m. We try again. Thank you. Jihan left before she could change her mind. When the door closed, Zuri sank onto the couch with Minji in her arms. Your daddy, she told him softly, is either the most dangerous thing that could happen to us or the most important. And I don't know which yet. Through the window she watched Yunsu open the car door for Jihan. But before he got in, Jihan looked back up at the 4th floor. Just for a second. Zuri didn't wave. Didn't acknowledge it. But she didn't look away either. Day 5, 6, and 7 passed without incident. Jihan showed up each morning. Learned Minji's preferences. Porridge warm but not hot. Room temperature slightly cool for sleeping. Singing during face wiping to make it tolerable. He was raised by nannies and drivers, educated in the finest schools but ignorant of these basics. And now he was learning not just the actions but the why behind them. The caregiving is love, not transaction. On day 7, as Zuri was leaving for her shift, Jihan said quietly, I need to tell you something. About the business. Zuri's hand stilled on her purse. Okay. I'm restructuring. Selling off the divisions that operate in gray areas. The ones that made you leave. Jihan, let me finish. He didn't look at her, focusing instead on building a tower of blocks that Minji immediately destroyed with gleeful hands. It's not just for you. Or even for him. It's for me. I'm tired, Zuri. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Of wondering which deal will cross a line I can't uncross. Of becoming my father. Will it work? Zuri asked. Can you just walk away? Not walk away. Transform. He looked at her then. But it won't be easy. There will be pushback. People who depend on those arrangements. People who'll see this as weakness. Will it be dangerous? Possibly, he answered honestly. But staying the same is dangerous too. Just in different ways. Zuri processed this. The commitment he was offering not just to her or Minji but to becoming someone different. Someone better. What do you need from me? She asked. Your patience. And maybe, he hesitated, maybe someday your trust. Real trust. Not just tolerance. I'm working on it, Zuri said honestly. It's hard to trust when I've been burned. I know. And she saw that he did. Saw it in the careful way he moved around her boundaries. In the transparency he'd promised and was delivering. In the way he showed up every single morning, even when it would have been easier not to. 2 weeks into their routine, Zuri's phone rang again. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped, remembering the lawyer incident. But when she answered, the voice was different. Older. Female. Cultured. Ms. Miller, this is Choi Seon-hee. I'm Han Jihun's mother. Zuri sat down slowly. Mrs. Han. I'd like to meet you. And my grandson. This afternoon if possible. I can come to you. That's not, I don't think, Zuri's mind raced. I'm not here to threaten or judge. The woman's voice softened slightly. I simply want to know the child my son speaks of constantly. And the woman who raised him alone. Jihan talks about us. He talks about little else. A pause. My son has been many things in his life. Driven, brilliant, sometimes frightening in his focus. But until now, he's never been lit up. That's your doing, Ms. Miller. You and the baby. I want to understand that. Zuri's mind raced. Meeting Jihan's mother, the matriarch of Biko Group, the woman who'd raised an heir to an empire, the woman who probably had very specific ideas about appropriate matches for her son. 2 o'clock, Zuri heard herself say. At the park near here. Neutral ground. I'll be there. When Mrs. Kim arrived and asked what was wrong, Zuri just shook her head. I'm about to find out if this thing with Jihan is really possible, or if his family will never accept us. Mrs. Kim, who'd watched enough dramas to understand family politics, patted her hand. You're stronger than you know. And that baby, he's your shield. No grandmother can resist. Zuri hoped she was right. At 1:58, a town car pulled up to the playground. Not the flashy Genesis, but something more understated. An older woman emerged, elegant in the way that comes from generations of refinement, but dressed simply. She carried a wrapped box. Zuri stood with Minji on her hip, Mrs. Kim hovering nearby like a protective aunt. Ms. Miller, Mrs. Han approached with a slight bow. Thank you for meeting me. Mrs. Han. Zuri returned the bow awkwardly, one-armed. The woman's eyes went immediately to Minji. Hungry eyes, but not for possession. For connection. He has Jihan's eyes, she said softly. But your strength in the chin. I think he's his own person, Zuri said carefully. Of course, Mrs. Han extended the box. A small gift. Traditional sweets for the child. Zuri accepted it, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Thank you. They sat on a bench. Minji studied his grandmother with serious curiosity. Mrs. Han didn't grab for him, didn't demand. Just waited. The patience of someone who understood that some things couldn't be rushed. My son has been different, Mrs. Han said eventually, since he found you again. Or perhaps since he lost you. He stopped sleeping properly. Stopped caring about succession plans. I thought it was stress from business, but it was grief. He never tried to find me, Zuri said. No. Because you asked him not to. Mrs. Han's gaze was direct but not unkind. There was a letter after you left. You made it clear you wanted no contact. He respected that even as it destroyed him. Zuri's breath caught. She'd sent that letter, short, final, explaining nothing because explaining would have required reopening wounds. She'd thought it merciful at the time. Now she saw it might have been cruel in its own way. I didn't know I was pregnant when I wrote it, she whispered. I understand, Mrs. Han said. But he didn't. He thought you'd chosen freedom over him. And in his world where everything is about power and control, your choice, she paused. It was the first time someone had walked away without being bought or threatened. Terrified him. So he let me go. He respected your wishes. Which, for a man trained never to accept loss, was perhaps the greatest act of love he could offer. Mrs. Han looked at Minji, and something in her expression softened. Until this one came along. Minji chose that moment to reach for his grandmother, little arms extending with that pure trust that only children possess. Mrs. Han's composure cracked just slightly as she accepted him. She held him like something precious and breakable, and when she spoke again, her voice was rougher around the edges. I've made mistakes with my son, she said quietly. Raised him for power, not happiness. Taught him to control, not to trust. But looking at this child, her voice caught. I want better for him. And for Jihan to have better. What are you asking me? Zuri needed it clear, needed to understand the terms. I'm asking you to give him a real chance. Not tests or trials, but partnership. He's trying in his clumsy way to be worthy of this. Of you. Mrs. Han looked up, meeting Zuri's eyes. And I'm asking for the chance to know my grandson. Not as an heir or obligation. Just as Minji. The honesty was unexpected. Disarming. Zuri saw where Jihan got his directness. His way of cutting through pretense to get to the truth. I'm scared, Zuri admitted. Of your world. Of what it could do to him. To us. Good, Mrs. Han said firmly. Fear keeps you vigilant. But don't let it keep you from building something real. She rocked Minji gently, and the baby, who usually fussed with strangers, had dozed off against her shoulder. My son is not an easy man. He's been shaped by violence and strategy. But underneath, she looked at the sleeping baby. Underneath, he's capable of such tenderness. You've already seen it in glimpses. Give him time to make it permanent. Mrs. Han carefully transferred Minji back to Zuri. I won't interfere. Won't pressure. But know that you have my support. Both of you. If anyone in our circles gives you trouble, they'll answer to me. It was a promise of protection. Power wielded differently, not to control but to shield. Thank you, Zuri said and meant it. Mrs. Han stood, paused. He loves you, you know. He hasn't said it. Jihan was never good with those words. My late husband wasn't either. It's how they were raised. But I see it in how he speaks of you. How he prioritizes these mornings over million-dollar meetings. She straightened her elegant coat. Love for men like him looks like showing up. Remember that. She left before Zuri could respond. The town car pulled away smoothly, leaving Zuri standing in the playground with a sleeping baby and a head full of thoughts. Mrs. Kim emerged from where she'd been pretending not to eavesdrop. Well? She asked in Korean. Well, Zuri echoed in English, then switched to Korean. Maybe this really could work. 3 weeks in, Jihan had a key. Not because he demanded it, but because Zuri had offered one morning when she was juggling Minji and groceries and her work bag all at once. He'd stood there looking at the small piece of metal, like it was a contract worth billions. You're sure? He'd asked. You're here every day anyway. Might as well make it easier. But they both knew it meant more. Trust. Access. The slow rebuilding of something that had once been. The call came on a Thursday. Zuri was at the diner, handling the breakfast rush, the usual crowd of construction workers and taxi drivers and students grabbing cheap food before class. Her phone vibrated insistently in her apron pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. She couldn't check it immediately. Had to finish taking orders, had to deliver plates of kimchi jjigae and pork cutlets. But the vibrating didn't stop. When she finally pulled out her phone, her stomach dropped. Jihan's name. Mrs. Kim's name. An unknown number. 3 missed calls in 5 minutes. She answered Mrs. Kim first, stepping into the kitchen, away from the noise. The baby, Mrs. Kim's voice was panicked, her Korean rapid and frightened. He's burning up. Very hot. I called ambulance. They're taking him to Hana Hospital now. Zuri didn't remember taking off her apron. Didn't remember telling her manager she had to leave. Didn't remember the subway ride. Though later she'd find the ticket stub in her pocket. All she remembered was the fear, cold and absolute, that something was wrong with her baby and she wasn't there. Hana Hospital's emergency room was chaos. Always was. But Zuri pushed through it all, searching for. There. Jihan. Still in his suit from whatever meeting he'd left. Standing in the waiting area like an island of stillness in the chaos around him. When he saw her, he moved immediately. Met her halfway. Solid. Present. He's with doctors, Jihan said quickly, his hand finding her elbow, steadying her. High fever but conscious. They're running tests now. What happened? Mrs. Kim said he was fine this morning. Then around 11 he got fussy. By noon he was burning up. Jihan's jaw was tight. I got here 20 minutes ago. I should have been there, Zuri said. I should have. You were working. Providing for him. He cut her off gently. Don't do that. We're both here now. A doctor emerged, young and efficient. Minji's parents? Yes, they said together. And something about saying it in unison steadied Zuri slightly. He has a high fever, 39.8 degrees, the doctor said. We've given him fever reducers and we're monitoring him closely. It appears to be a viral infection, common in infants, but we'd like to keep him overnight for observation. Can we see him? Zuri's voice shook despite her best efforts. Of course. He's awake and asking for. The doctor checked her notes, Mama. They followed her to the pediatric ward. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and the particular sadness of sick children. Zuri had worked in a hospital during her medical school rotations. She knew these smells. Knew what they meant. But knowing didn't make it easier when it was her own child. Minji was in a crib under harsh hospital lights, so small and vulnerable. And 4 ran into his tiny hand, taped carefully to keep him from pulling it out. When he saw Zuri, his face crumpled, arms reaching. Oh baby. She scooped him up carefully, mindful of the 4 line. Mama's here. I'm here. Minji clung to her, whimpering. His little body radiating heat that scared her. Jihan stood close, one hand on Zuri's back, the other gently touching Minji's forehead. He's so hot, Jihan murmured, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Raw fear. The medicine will help, the doctor assured them. But the next few hours are about keeping him comfortable and hydrated. We'll monitor closely. They settled in. Zuri took the rocking chair, holding Minji against her chest. Jihan pulled another chair close, so close their knees almost touched. The nurse brought formula, but Minji wouldn't take it. Too tired. Too uncomfortable. Try singing, Jihan suggested quietly. That song you do in the mornings. Zuri's voice was rough, scraped raw by fear, but she tried. A lullaby her grandmother had taught her back in the States, before she'd ever imagined she'd end up in Seoul with a sick baby and a reformed gangster sitting beside her. Minji's eyes fluttered, calmed by the familiar sound. Hours passed. The fever didn't break immediately. Minji dozed fitfully, waking to cry, then settling again when Zuri or Jihan soothed him. They took turns holding him, walking him, trying to get him to drink even a little. Around midnight, with Minji finally sleeping more soundly, Zuri slumped in the chair. I was so scared, she whispered. When Mrs. Kim called, I thought. Me too, Jihan said. He was on the floor beside her chair now, exhausted, his expensive suit rumpled. When she called, I was in a board meeting, discussing quarterly projections or some meaningless thing, and I just walked out. You walked out of a board meeting? I thought. He stopped, couldn't finish the sentence. That we'd lose him. Yes. Zuri looked at him. Really looked. This powerful man, this person who commanded rooms and moved millions and operated in a world of absolute control, reduced to the same terror as any other parent. No leverage. No strategy. Just a father afraid for his son. Thank you, she said softly, for being here. Where else would I be? A million places. 1,000 more important things. No. His voice was absolute. Nothing is more important than this. Than him. Than you. The confession hung in the air between them. Zuri was too exhausted to deflect it, too raw to pretend it didn't matter. I love you, Jihan said quietly. I should have said it 2 years ago. Should have said it every day since. But I was afraid of what admitting it would mean. What it would demand from me. Jihan, let me finish. He stood, moved to kneel beside her chair, putting himself at eye level. Vulnerable. I love you. Not because of Minji, though he's the greatest gift, but because of who you are. Your strength. Your refusal to be bought or controlled. The way you've built a life from nothing and made it full. Tears slipped down Zuri's cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. I'm terrified, she whispered, of believing you. Of letting myself want this. And then, she gestured helplessly at Minji. What if something happens? What if your world catches up? What if? Then we face it together. His hand covered hers on Minji's back. I can't promise perfect safety. Can't promise an easy life. But I can promise I'll be here. Every fever. Every fear. Every ordinary Tuesday. That's my commitment, for as long as you'll let me. I love you too, Zuri whispered. I never stopped. Even when I left. Even when I was angry. I loved you. And that's what made it so hard. And now? Now, she looked at their son, peaceful finally. Now I think maybe we could try. Really try. Not tests or probation. But partnership. Jihan's smile was soft. Grateful. Partnership. Minji stirred, whimpered. They both leaned in automatically, a united front of comfort. The baby settled without fully waking, reassured by their presence. He's going to be okay, the night nurse said softly, checking vitals. Fever's coming down. You both should rest. But neither did. They stayed awake through the night, watching their son breathe. Together. I need to pause here because this is the moment that changes everything. This hospital room, this fever, this moment of absolute vulnerability. This is where they stop pretending and start building something real. But before I tell you what happens next, before I tell you about the proposal, about the restructuring of Biko Group, about how they build a life that's neither his world nor hers but something entirely new, I need something from you. If you're still here, if you've watched 35 minutes of Zuri and Jihan's story, that means something. That means this resonated. That means you see yourself in their struggle, their fear, their hope. So here's what I'm asking. Subscribe to this channel right now. Not just for more stories like this, but because your subscription tells YouTube that stories about second chances matter. That stories about complicated love and imperfect people trying to be better matter. That story's about family built not on perfection but on showing up matter. And comment below. What would you do in Zuri's position? Would you forgive? Would you take the risk? Would you let yourself love someone who'd hurt you once before? Because here's the truth, your engagement, your comments, your likes, they don't just help this video. They help it reach single mothers working double shifts who need to know they're not alone. They help it reach men trying to be better fathers who need to see that change is possible. They help it reach anyone who's ever had to choose between safety and love. So please, subscribe, comment, share. Be part of something bigger than just a story. Now let's finish this. Let's talk about how Zuri and Jihan build their forever. 3 months after the hospital, Zuri woke to sunlight and the sound of voices. Not her cramped apartment. She'd gotten used to the space now, gotten used to waking up in Jihan's house in Songbuk-dong. Not a cage as she'd feared. Just home. She'd moved in slowly. A drawer first, testing the waters. Then half the closet. Finally fully. When the lease on her old place expired and Mrs. Kim agreed to move into the first-floor guest room, as Minji's official nanny and unofficial family. Zuri followed the voices to the kitchen. Jihan was there in pajama pants and a t-shirt. A sight that still surprised her sometimes, this powerful man in loungewear, holding Minji while attempting to make pancakes with one hand. He was terrible at it. The batter was lumpy. The pan was smoking. "You're supposed to let it cool first," Zuri said from the doorway, unable to suppress her smile. Jihan turned sheepish. "I wanted to surprise you. Consider me surprised." She moved in, took over the pan. "And charmed. Mostly because you tried." Minji reached for her, babbling. "Mama. Appa." "He said it," Jihan said, his whole face lighting up with that unguarded joy she'd seen more and more of lately. "Did you hear? He called me Appa. Only took 4 months of relentless bribery. Worth every toy. Worth everything." Jihan kissed Minji's head, then almost shyly kissed Zuri's temple. They settled at the table, a real table in a real kitchen, with sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a garden. Real grass. Flowering trees. Space for Minji to run when he was older. It was beautiful. But what made it home wasn't the luxury. It was the mess. Toys scattered across the floor. Minji's high chair with dried cereal stuck to the tray. Zuri's medical textbook stacked on the counter because she was back in school now, part-time, manageable with Jihan and Mrs. Kim's help. She'd graduate in 2 years, become the doctor she'd always planned to be. "I have a meeting this afternoon," Jihan mentioned, feeding Minji a piece of banana. "Board of directors. The restructuring plan." Nervous. Terrified, he admitted with a grin. "But it's happening. The last of the gray market contracts end next month. By year's end, Biko Group will be fully legitimate. How does it feel? Lighter." He looked at her across the table. "Like I can finally breathe without wondering what's coming. There's been pushback. Some of the old guard aren't happy about it. But Mom handles them better than I ever could." He paused, reaching across to take her hand. "And knowing I'm coming home to this, to you too, makes every difficult conversation worth it." "I'm proud of you," Zuri said. She meant it. "What you've done, walking away from what was easy, that's real strength." "I learned from you," Jihan said simply. "You walked away when it would have been easier to stay. When it would have been safer, more comfortable. You chose hard and right over easy and wrong. I'm just trying to do the same." They ate in comfortable quiet. Minji made a mess as toddlers do. Jihan wiped him down patiently, making silly faces that made the baby giggle. Zuri poured more coffee, watched them together, and felt something settle in her chest. Something like peace. Later, when Jihan was getting ready for his meeting, Zuri stopped him in the hallway. "I was thinking," she said, and he turned with that slight smile that said he knew her thinking voice meant something important. "Dangerous," he teased. She smacked his arm lightly. "I was thinking maybe we should talk about the future. Really talk." "What kind of future?" "The permanent kind." Her heart was pounding now, but she pushed through. "The kind with legal paperwork. Ceremony. Commitment made official." Jihan went very still. "Zuri Miller, are you proposing to me?" "Maybe. If you're interested." He crossed the distance between them in 3 steps, cupped her face in his hands. "I've been interested since the moment I saw you again. Since you stood in that doorway at 3 in the morning, exhausted and beautiful and so fiercely protective of our son. Since before that, probably. Since you first told me off in that hospital cafeteria 2.5 years ago. That's not an answer, she said, but she was smiling. Yes. He kissed her softly. Yes, I'm interested. Yes, I want forever. Yes to whatever shape that takes, traditional Korean ceremony, American wedding, both, neither, whatever makes you happy. Both, Zuri decided. Korean ceremony for your mother. Church service for mine. All of it. Deal. He rested his forehead against hers. Whenever we're ready. There's no rush. We're already building this life. The paperwork is just making it official. Minji toddled over, pulling on Jihan's pant leg. Up. They both reached for him, lifted him together. 3 people becoming family not through blood alone but through choice. Through work. Through showing up day after ordinary day. We should probably tell your mother, Zuri said. About the engagement. Before she hears through some business channel. She already knows, Jihan admitted with a grin. What? She's been asking when I'd get around to it for weeks. Even offered to help plan. Fair warning. She's very excited about a wedding. Of course she is, Zuri laughed. Of course she knows. They stood together in the morning light streaming through the windows. A Korean man from old power trying to become something better. An American woman building the life she'd always wanted. And their son, bridge between worlds, proof that love transcends the boundaries people build. I never thought I'd get this, Zuri said softly. A partner who stays. A family that feels safe. Neither did I, Jihan said, holding them both. I thought power was the goal. Respect through fear. Control through strength. But this, he gestured at the messy kitchen. The scattered toys, the beautiful chaos of their life. This is everything I didn't know I needed. It started with a text, Zuri mused. 3 words about milk. Best message I ever received. Most terrifying one I ever sent. They laughed together and Minji babbled along. Not understanding but joining the joy anyway. 6 months later, Zuri stood in a hanbok, traditional Korean dress, in the courtyard of Jihan's mother's house. The ceremony had been beautiful. Traditional. Both families present. Hers flown in from the States. Skeptical at first but won over by Jihan's genuine devotion and Minji's infectious smile. The American ceremony would come next month, in a small church in her hometown. 2 weddings. 2 cultures. 1 family. But right now, in this moment, Zuri watched Jihan with their son. Minji was walking now, toddling around the courtyard in his own tiny hanbok, being fussed over by his grandmother and great-aunts. Jihan followed him patiently, ready to catch him if he fell. Mrs. Kim stood beside Zuri, dabbing at her eyes. I knew it would work out, she said in Korean. From that first morning when he showed up early. I knew. You didn't say anything, Zuri replied in careful Korean, still learning but getting better. Some things you have to figure out yourself. Mrs. Kim smiled. But I prayed for you both. Every day. Jihan looked up then caught Zuri's eye across the courtyard. Even surrounded by family and tradition and celebration, his gaze found hers. Steady. Sure. Home. He picked up Minji, brought him over. Our son wants his mother, Jihan said. Our son wants cake, Zuri corrected, taking the toddler. But close enough. I love you, Jihan said. Still working on saying it more. Still learning. I know, Zuri replied. You show me every day. And that was the truth of it, really. Love wasn't always about the words. Sometimes it was about showing up at 7 a.m. every morning. About changing diapers and making terrible pancakes and walking away from the easy path to find a better one. Sometimes love was a text sent in desperation at 2:47 in the morning. And sometimes it was the man who showed up 20 minutes later with formula and a promise to try. Sometimes love was building a family from broken pieces and finding that the cracks made it stronger, not weaker. Minji grabbed both their faces, pulling them together for a sloppy toddler kiss. They laughed, the 3 of them, a small unit of imperfect people choosing each other every single day. The photographer captured the moment. The courtyard full of family. The traditional hanbok and modern love. The Korean heir and the American doctor. The baby who brought them back together. But the real story wasn't in the photograph. It was in the mornings that led here. The hospital nights. The hard conversations. The choice to trust again after trust was broken. The story was in showing up. And they did. Every day. Together. And that's where we leave Zuri and Jihan. Not at the end, but at a beginning. Because that's what real love stories are. Not endings, but commitments to keep beginning again, day after day. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and dangerous men learning to be gentle and women choosing love, even when it's terrifying, then I need you to do something for me. 3 things actually. First, subscribe to this channel right now. Click that button. Turn on notifications. We share stories like this every single week. Stories of hope and healing and hearts that find their way home. Stories about people who aren't perfect but who try anyway. Stories that remind us that change is possible, that love can survive mistakes, that families can be built from broken pieces. Second, like this video. Give it a thumbs up. Because your engagement, your likes, your comments, your shares, that's what helps this story reach the people who need to hear it. The single mother working 3 jobs who needs to know she's not alone. The father trying to be better than his own father was. The person choosing between safety and love and wondering if they're making the right choice. Third, comment below. Tell me, would you have sent that text? Would you have given Jihan a second chance? What would you have done differently? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your story, your perspective, your truth. Because here's what I believe, stories like this matter. They remind us that people can change. That love isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for. That showing up day after ordinary day is the most romantic thing we can do. So please subscribe, like, comment. Be part of this community. Help us share stories that matter. Thank you for spending these 45 minutes with Zuri and Jihan. Thank you for believing in their story. Thank you for being here. Until next time, remember, sometimes all it takes is 3 words to change everything. Sometimes all it takes is showing up. Good night, and sweet dreams.